Okay, Rise Up in Real Estate. We are back. Rise Up Nation, we're back for another edition of Rise Up in Real Estate live stream. And I've got two of my favorite people in the world here. A lot of times we might have guests from other places, and we do get two guests from another place, but just right down the road, Renny and Ashley are here today. Ashley's name's not on the screen, but you know Ashley. She's our Director of Agent Development and a lot of other things. But today, just a little bit of housekeeping before we introduce Renny. We are in coastal South Carolina, for those of you that don't know, those of you that are coming on and haven't seen us before. I know last week we had a guest from Missouri, so there might be new people listening from there. But we are a real estate brokerage that's just doing things like everybody else is doing them in the country, trying to figure things out. And this show is live today. If you have questions, you are welcome to shoot those at us at any time. Renny will be happy to answer those, or Ashley. And then this episode will be edited and played next week on all the podcast channels, Apple Pod and StreamYard, etc. So, Renny, I'll show you. This is how it's going to go. We've already got a comment, and I'll show it to you. Can you see that? Okay.
Oh yeah.
Alina's on there. Yeah. Hi, Alina. Alina's a faithful listener. She's always on here, and I know she's got some great questions for you. So anyway, we are going to talk today a little bit about some things that were in the news a ton. Now they're in the news way less because we're just doing work and doing business now. And I want to start by saying we are not an attorney. These things are our opinion. Renny is the broker in charge of our real estate company, but she's not your broker in charge. So if she says something that's different than what you do, you go check it out with your broker in charge. This is how we operate. But I thought it was pretty cool now, especially as we wrap up this year, Renny, to kind of talk a little bit about how things have gone and just your opinion. And Ashley, I know you've done a lot of behind the scenes with this as well. So you jump in and give your 2 cents. I don't list or sell real estate anymore, so I'm sure I missed some things. But before we dive that far in, Renny, I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, where are you from? And a little bit about your history, just to catch the listeners up that might not know you.
Good morning, everyone. Renny Diedrich. I am from Green Bay, Wisconsin. Go Pack Go. We had a good win last night. So yes, I was born and raised in Green Bay, probably about 2 miles from Lambeau Field. So yes, I am a Packers fan. You can't live 2 miles from Lambeau Field and not be. I love cheese curds. I don't consider myself a cheese head. I don't wear cheese on my head, but I do love cheese. I am married. We have 2 kids and 4 grandbabies. All boys.
That's hard. Well, the 2 kids, you got a boy and a girl, right?
A boy and a girl, but 4 grandsons.
All 4 grandsons. That's crazy. Renny, you don't look like you should have grandbabies, but congratulations to you on that. And good win last night. I don't know if Scott and Renee Comey are listening this morning, but they beat their Seattle Seahawks. Yeah, way to go. I'm so happy that you did that, because I happen to be a huge Packer fan because you got me socks a few years ago, and I still wear those. Ashley, introduce yourself real quick, so since your name's not on the screen.
Yeah, so I'm Ashley Lamborn. I was on a couple weeks ago. I'm our Director of Agent Development, so happy to be included today. I've learned a lot from Renny, so this is a really great opportunity. But I grew up in Pennsylvania, then moved to Virginia, went to Virginia Tech, and then came to South Carolina and realized last week that as of June this year, I will have lived in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina longer than any other place. Whoa. Which is strange because Pennsylvania always feels like home. Yeah, but starting in June, I'll be here longer than I grew up and lived in Pennsylvania. So
I always think it's funny when people ask you where are you from? And I don't know if the question is where were you born or where do you currently live? Because most people don't live where they're from, right?
Yeah.
But it's always like that. And I always look at how am I supposed to answer this question?
Well,
we'll have a homecoming for you, Ashley, in June. We should have a party because this will be your official home. And I know, Renny, I was born in Alabama, but I hardly ever answer that way. I have to give Tracy wants to know how long you've been in South Carolina, Renny.
I moved here on January 1st of 2014. Got in the car and drove from Green Bay, Wisconsin. It's a long time.
Good. Remind me, your Tim came first, right?
Tim came first. He moved in August
That's her husband.
Of 2013. And so he moved here first. then I lived with my brother and sister-in-law. They were so nice to let me occupy the bedroom in their house, share their space with me. We had sold our house, and so yes, I stayed there, and then he came back probably for my birthday, and then New Year's Eve, we spent New Year's Eve with my brother and sister-in-law, and then New Year's Day, rise and shine, get in the car and go through a snowstorm.
Of course.
Oh, of course. It was a snowstorm. That would be appropriate. And I tell the story a lot to people that I'm close to, but I remember the day we met you at King Street Grill. Mandy and I went to lunch with you and Tim, and we were trying to interview this person. When I found out Tim was married to someone who had real estate experience, I was like, this is very interesting. So let's meet Renny. So we sat down. You ran some brokerages up there too, didn't you?
Yes, we didn't call them broker in charges, they're just called broker managers. I ran, our company had about 15 offices. I was the broker for 3 of them, had about 50 agents. And my niche really was working with people brand new to the business. My company had a startup office. So literally I had to bring my own desk and my own chair, and they provided a phone and some workspace, like an office to reside in, but the rest was up to me. And so my focus really was brand new people, because I do really like teaching people, helping people, mentoring people. And that's really how I got started. And it's amazing to watch those people that I'm still friends with today, how well that they've done in their business. They really applied themselves, and it's great. Like the proud mother duck moment,
Yeah. And I appreciate what Jeremy said when he said you were one of the best brokers. And I've heard a lot of people say that about you. I think it's actually, whenever I hear you're introduced as our broker in charge, to me, it's a little bit underwhelming, because you do so much for us and are so important to us. That is a big part of what you've done, though. But I want you to tell the listeners a little bit about your experience with the associations too, just to help people understand you're not just a fly-by-night broker, that you have been involved and are involved for a long time.
Yeah, so I really just I started at a title company in college. So title companies clearly deal with real estate transactions, and that's really how I got started in this business. Then worked for a real estate company, actually worked for an agent on a team, and then ended up being a broker of the startup office, and it just kind of grew from there. Then at that point, I got very active in the local and state association in Wisconsin. Ended up on the board of directors for WRA, the Wisconsin Realtors Association. Very proud of my time there. Actually worked my way up through leadership there, and they call it the chairman of the board, just like the president of the association. And I finished up my 2013 year as chairman of the board of the Wisconsin Realtors Association before we got in that car, drove through the snowstorm, and moved to Myrtle Beach. And then from that point on, I got very involved in the local association here at the Coastal Carolina Association of Realtors, and been involved with SCR, the South Carolina Association of Realtors, and NAR director. I was an NAR director back when I was in Wisconsin, so very heavily involved in associations, different committees, part of grievance, professional standards, forums, a lot of different things. Very passionate about this industry and making it the best it can be for everyone.
And so I was going to ask you, and Ashley, if you end up with a question that you want to throw at her, just like do your finger like this or something, so I'll stop talking. Because I talk a lot, and I don't want you to feel like you can't ask. Just hop in and ask a question. I know that you're a big why person. Like what? Yes. There's always, you don't do things just because. There's always a reason. And so I wanted to ask you why you decided to get so involved. You were doing a great job as you didn't call it a broker in charge up in Wisconsin, but you were doing a great job in your job, I'm sure. But why did you choose to get involved at a high level?
It's nice to see the big picture, right? Because I was never a person like, don't tell me to do something without explaining the why to it. Because if you just tell me to do something, I'm the type of person like, I'm not going to do it. I mean, I did it that way with my husband when he tried to teach me golf. Like my husband's a great golfer. He's a way better golfer than I am. But he just kept saying, you need to do this, you need to do this. I'm like, no, I can do it my own way. Had I just listened to him, and as I started to listen to him, I actually progressed in golf. Not that I golf anymore. But anyway, the whole point is I need to understand the reasoning behind it. Like, just don't say it's white. Why is it white? Or why do we do this? And how does one thing layer upon the next, It makes it easier for me to understand. I get a ton of questions, and if I don't understand the why behind it, I can't put the pieces of the puzzle together. And that's honestly where I got involved, to see the big picture, how they work legislatively, how that impacts our business. I don't consider myself a political person. However, I do have strong opinions on what will help my business, right? Like, there are a lot of people that make decisions about our industry that don't know anything about our industry. I don't like that. So if I can put myself in a position to help people understand, when you say do this, like, do you really understand what that's going to do to our business? And if I can be a part of the change to make things better, it fuels me. It fuels me in ways that people don't understand. Like, it's just, again, if I can make it better for everyone, if there's a pain point, how can we solve that pain point, and how can we fix it, and how can we expand it? It's really it makes me tick.
Yeah. Ashley, would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. So I get the privilege of sometimes sitting side by side with Renny as she is fielding calls and whatever fires might come up in the day. And I have heard her say it over and over again. I need to just ask some questions because I'm a big why person. So I want to understand. I want to help you understand that here's how this has to look, but here's the why behind it. And it helps level people out when emotions are high, as she's helping agents that maybe have clients who are up and down that emotional roller coaster of buying or selling a house. Kind of dialing back to that why even helps her like smooth that over and negotiate that piece between people. So she must say, I'm a big why person, like 70 times a day. I hear it all day long. So I agree with that 100%.
And I think other people learn that way, because I think inherently people want to understand, right? They may call and ask a question, but I also want them to feel better after the call, to know, like, feel confident about the answer, that then they're going to have a conversation with their client, right? Because if you just tell a client you have to do X, they may say, no, I don't want to do X. And if you can then turn it around, like, here's why, it helps them understand. And I'm also a choice person. Like, if you can give people two choices, they feel empowered, right? They feel empowered to, okay, well, I can either do this and this happens, or I can do this and this can happen. Okay, now you get to decide which path you want to go down. So I really feel like that's the education component. And the more you can dive into, it's not just what is 1 + 1. We never get those questions, right? Like, there's layers upon layers upon layers in their contract. And that's why I always ask a ton of questions. It's usually I get a question, but I can't really answer the question, because I know there's other pieces and parts that go with it. And had maybe I known all those pieces and parts, I maybe would have guided them down a different path, right? So I do like to know more to help them, so they can help their clients, because their client is going to inherently ask them, well, why would you recommend that? Or why did you say this? And it makes them better at what they do.
And then they don't have to, they can start making those decisions on their own, and they learn as they go. And I mean, you're making better agents along the way. Better, you're like a mini negotiator, like a problem solver, like a investigator is a better word. Like trying to, and you, and I think what I've appreciated about you is you don't have although you'll die on the sword for our agents, but you are very much a black and white. What does the contract say? Sometimes you have to give bad news, I'm sure, to people that you care very much about, that, hey, it's not going to go the way you think, right? So I've appreciated that about you more than you know, that you're super fair in what you do. Margaret,
part of it, like, it's about the contract. And to me, I always take the emotion out. I try to take the emotion out of it, because our agents are typically very emotional. Their clients are typically very emotional, and it can cloud your judgment. Right. So people want to go down add all these different layers, like, oh, that's not important. That's not important. Like, I literally, to your point, want to know what's in the contract. What did you agree to? What's in writing? Because we can feel one way or another. And I also, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It matters what we agreed to, or what are we trying to accomplish? And sometimes they need that person to cut through all that, cut through the noise and say, okay, here's where it is. It's not all these other things. It's just right here.
Margaret has a good question for you. Sorry. What strategies have you found most effective for building strong relationships and dealing with the diverse range of people you work with and have to deal with? And how do you do it? Margaret's always on here. I love that. Thanks, Margaret.
Aww. I guess my strategy really is asking questions. It's not like people call me and ask me questions, and I answer their question with multiple questions. I don't just answer their questions. And I think I probably learned that from phone duty. Back in the day, like not everyone knows what phone duty is, but back in the day, we had phone duty. I loved phone duty. Oh my gosh. Hey, what's the price of 123 Main Street? I never told them the price. I asked them 50 million questions. I got their name, their birthday, their address, all this stuff. It was great because you answer questions and you build that connection. So diverse group of people, like everyone really just wants a solution, right? Some people just want to complain. That's okay. I can listen to people complain. If you know the people you're dealing with, even if you don't, normally if you just listen to people, you can accomplish what you need to accomplish. Because sometimes I say they just need to vomit, because they need to vomit and get it out. And once they get it out, okay, now we can focus on the solution. And I think it's just inherently knowing people need to be heard. And if you can just listen, not talk, just listen. Although I'm talking a lot, I do know how to listen.
It is the idea of a live
podcast.
We're requiring you to talk a lot right now.
Yes.
I mean, that's about curiosity. I mean, these are great, by the way, these are great relationship tips also. I mean, everything you said, I've been thinking about what a great wife you must be if you take that same approach at home, because if you're just curious about what somebody else wants, and you really, like in your position, you kind of have to be because you're trying to get a job done. But if you are curious about that other person because you care about them, people like themselves. They like to talk about themselves. That's the reason this podcast is still alive, because we talk about each other and we get to know Ashley a little bit better and Renny a little bit better. But that's very wise. And I think we have something in common, Renny. I didn't know you loved phone duty. Like I used to love.
Oh my God, I loved it.
I love that.
Prying information out of people. It was great. And then I'd walk away and I'd give the name, like, here. Like maybe they got up to go to the bathroom or ran out to show property. Like I gave them everything. Here's the name, phone number, address. Here's a live one.
That's great. You would be a great administrator, although you're past that in your career, but you would be.
I did though. So when I started my startup office, I was everything. I was the secretary. I was the broker. I was the trainer. I was the bathroom cleaner. I was the light bulb changer. You do it all.
Hey, Ashley, let's be honest. She's still all those things.
I know. So, Renny always comes in dressed very professionally. Oftentimes she's wearing a dress, and yet she's pulling the garbage out and hauling it out back if she sees that it's full. There's just nothing that she won't tackle and take care of in the office.
Pulling weeds, killing ants. So there's no telling. Bruce Turman has a nice comment. Bruce, good morning. Renny's just real, and that works.
Oh, thank you, Bruce.
Sometimes it hurts.
It does.
But it works. Sometimes it hurts, but it works. And I'm not always I'm real, but I have a hard time. I'm a people pleaser, so I struggle with that. And Renny's so thankful that we have Renny on our upper leadership in this company. So let's talk a little bit.
I do like to please people too. That's the hard thing about it. Okay. I do want to please people too, but I don't always get to, because I say to them, like, I'm paid to tell you what you have to hear. It's not necessarily want to hear. And like, I don't love that, but that's what I have to do. Am I going to be their biggest advocate? Heck yeah. I mean, I'm going to go into battle with them and I'm going to help them fix whatever it is. But ultimately, I still have to tell them what it is, right? Like it's.
So one of my favorite stories to that point was when Renny shared with me that someone came and asked those pieces of advice, and they said she gave them the advice to her point, not what they wanted to hear, but what they had to hear. And they said, well, do I have to do what you're telling me to do? And she said, well, if you want me in your corner, if things go south, then I think that you need to do the steps that I just explained to you. And the personality of the person that asked that just makes me laugh every time I think of that story.
Yeah, what I've learned from her, Renny, is that you can either tell them now, eventually you'll tell them, right? Eventually it will come to being honest, telling them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. Eventually it's going to get there. You might as well do it as soon as you can, rather than I so often procrastinate, push it aside, wait. Somebody's going to ask me about it, I know, and then when they do, I have to talk about it. I'm just being honest. So this is nice. Alina says, Renny keeps us out of jail. Yeah, and we're actually going to get to that in just a second, Alina. So thanks for bringing that up. And listen, look at here. He can't help himself.
Oh, Vince is on vacation. He's so sweet.
Vince, go ahead and type in if the internet's good right now. Tell us where you are so we can live vicariously through you. I don't think you can send pictures, but I'm hoping you guys are having a nice cocktail somewhere. Jeremy says, what I love about Renny is that she doesn't beat around the bush. She pulls no punches and gets to the point to keep us safe. That kind of puts it in there. And I really, Renny, I know this is uncomfortable for you because I did not mean for this to be a Renny cheerleading session, but you need to hear it. I think that's awesome that you're getting the props that you deserve. What I'd love to do is, and I'm not sure how comfortable you are. Well, you and I didn't talk about this beforehand. I do that on purpose because I don't want this to be scripted at all. I'd rather it just be natural. Oh, Vince says he's about 50 miles outside of St. Martin.
Have fun, Vince.
Oh gosh, yeah. I look like I don't know why on here I'm always red. I had on my Santa hat, Renny, but it's just too hot in this office, so I took it off.
You have the red shirt on though.
That's why I have a T-shirt on. It's the only Christmas shirt I have. It's perfect. It's got Charlie Brown on, my favorite Christmas song. Let's talk a little bit. I don't know how comfortable you are talking about it, but there were some changes in our business around March. Some things that you educated us. My favorite thing about you is we were talking about for 2 years. Literally 2 years ago, I remember you saying things are getting ready to change with buyer's agency, and I was like, okay. And then literally 2 years later, all this stuff came down. I think you knew that when this lawsuit was filed in 2021 or whatever it was, and we're following along so closely. But I want to talk about, since the changes were made in March, tell me, I know there were two main changes. Am I right? Like we changed the ability to put the compensation on MLS, and we changed something major with buyer's agency. So talk to me about those two things and how you feel like it's going now. And this is, again, Renny's opinion, how she feels in her situation. So we're not going to hold you to anything, Renny. Just talk to me about how you feel it's going and how it's happened since March.
So I felt, as you said, like we knew this was happening. We didn't know exactly when the settlement would happen with the lawsuit, but we knew it was coming. We knew changes were going to be made. So we talked about it very proactively in our company to prepare our agents so they knew they weren't, all of a sudden, whoop, day one, they had no idea how to have this conversation. So I felt very lucky and grateful that our agents were put in that position to not be caught behind the eight ball. Was it a huge change? Absolutely. I will tell you, all of August was, oh my gosh, it was the hot mess express. I would say September was a hot mess express. But October, I felt like the light was coming at the end of the tunnel, and people adapted. It is what it is, right? Like I always say, there's one thing that's consistent in the real estate business is change. So if you hate change, don't get into real estate. It's that easy for me. Black and white, there we are again. But it's just real, like everything is changing. We are definitely not, the changes are not over. I feel like there's probably more changes that will be coming. But right now, I feel like for sure our agents honestly had a really good grasp of how to handle it. I felt like they were the leaders helping other agents in our marketplaces adapt to the changes because maybe they weren't as comfortable or prepared. And was it uncomfortable? Sure. The first time you do something, it's, not great, right? But as you continue to get better and practice and do it, like you kind of think about now, like, wow, everyone thought the sky was going to fall. Clearly the sky didn't fall. They've adapted, and you just know now this is the new normal. This is what I do moving forward. Honestly, I felt like they You know how earlier I talked about people making decisions on our business that are not in our business?
Mm-hmm.
There's unintended consequences for what they did. I don't think they solved what they really wanted to solve. That's, again, my personal opinion. I feel like our agents are in a position to really have more presentation conversations. They're able to talk about their value. They're able to talk comfortably about what they charge, why they charge what they charge, and get what they deserve versus merely just accepting what someone else deems their value to be. That, I would say, is the better part of it. Before we just took, I don't want to say the scraps because that's not a fair statement, but just took whatever someone else decided you were worth. I would say a year ago, no one would have ever, not no one, very few people would ever have said, you're offering me X, I want Y, I want Y. Very few times that conversation, a few, very minute. Fast forward, I feel like that conversations happens a lot more. And I feel like that's okay. You know, your client is ultimately responsible. And if they're comfortable what you're charging, why should someone get to dictate what you feel you're worth? So I think that's the good thing about it.
So let me ask you a question. Actually, let me throw this. I should have put this one up a minute ago. Miss Jess said, I'm a new agent in Florence. Renny reached out to me personally to check in. Let me know if she's there. I'm so thankful to be a part of the family. Jess, we're thankful that you're a part of our family. So thank you for sharing that. So you said, so March was the settlement. They rolled out the changes were August, like 17th or 20th or whatever the MLS decided. Yeah, 17th. I thought that was it. I know that some were on a different schedule because of MLS rules or whatever, but you said August, September, October were a hot mess express.
Mm-hmm.
I love that term that you use. Have you ever heard her say that, Ashley? I've heard her say that.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell me why? Is it because it was just new? Uncertainty, kind of fear?
I fear 100%. I also believe like some people didn't put in the time to understand what our forms say. As you know, I always say, what does the contract say? They like don't actually even know in our listing agreement. So like if you ask the average agent in the listing agreement, who pays the buyer agent compensation? And I bet you 90% would say the seller. And that's not the case. Our listing agreements say the seller is going to pay X in commission. The seller is allowing the listing broker to share with the buyer's broker. So it's in reality, the listing broker is sharing money with the buyer's agent. Now, some people love that. Some people hate it. I don't honestly care, but that is what our form says. So if you ask people how to, do their compensation agreement, they're like, well, the seller's paying. I'm like, the seller isn't paying it. The seller is paying the listing broker, and he's allowing the listing broker to share. So therefore, in that model, the listing broker should be signing the compensation agreement because they're the ones that, in essence, are paying you, not the seller, even though it's getting deducted from the seller's proceeds, which people can't quite wrap their heads around. So I feel like that was a big struggle. Who signs it? Can everyone sign it? Should everyone sign it? It's like, oh my gosh.
So it was a misunderstanding. That didn't change about the contract, right? So
Correct.
It was just the way that it was our lazy language from before that we just said the seller was paying it because we felt like the money's leaving the seller, but we're forgetting that it's going through the conduit of the listing broker. Correct. And they are making that distribution. So that was just laziness. But it's interesting that this change made that a real issue and made that, that's a good thing that now we understand that more, right?
And I 100% agree in transparency. If that is what the goal of this lawsuit was transparency, I'm 100% okay with it, but let's be honest of what it is, Again, to your point, Tad, that didn't change. That is always what our listing agreement said. And that was part of my frustration when I would have to talk to other people, like, read the words. These are what the words say, and this didn't change, and this whole misunderstanding, and then it just kind of spiraled out of control. And then the compensation agreement, when do you get it? Who's going to sign it? Does the buyer's agent do it? Does the listing broker do it? Again, I think once that got worked out and people got into their system of how they were going to run their business, it's just fine. But it was stressful. It was difficult, and it made, ultimately, we're supposed to help our consumer, until you have two professionals in the transaction, it made it very difficult for our consumer, in my opinion.
Yeah. Can you imagine, Ashley and Renny, can you imagine if this would have all changed in 2021 when transactions were so fast? Like, remember multiple, this would have been so much harder, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's not good that business slowed down, but it's great. It's great that we didn't have to go through that right. Part of it, because you were basically re-educating on the South Carolina contract, not even the changes really. At that's basic fundamental knowledge of the contract before you get to, it's because they had to explain the compensation, of course.
And then the layer of the compensation agreement, since they took compensation out of MLS, which again, you can love it or hate it. It is what it is. But I just felt like that was more transparent than what we're seeing now. Like, if sellers can arbitrarily decide what they want to pay, how is that transparent? Like, I get that a buyer's going to sign a contract with their buyer's agent for what that fee, what they're going to deem the acceptable fee is. But I also believe like it adds that extra layer of, I don't know,
Yeah.
Both are still at an all-time low. So people agree with the value, right? They are comfortable with the value proposition that buyer's agents and listing agents are providing. Otherwise, if they didn't, you would see more transactions not using a realtor, and that's not what we're finding. I feel like maybe it has solidified our place even more of why they need someone versus, doing it on their own. And gosh, what if you do it wrong, right? Like that's your biggest asset. You don't want to mess that up,
Yeah, let's be honest. The public can't afford to be sued like Remax was, or like NAR was, or like Keller Williams. They can't afford to make that mistake. Michelle, our sweet Michelle, says, I learned from Renny, and she meant to say something new every time she's in my office. She's the best of the best. Look at that pretty picture of you that Facebook shared, Michelle. Looks like you're at Christmas time. I love it. Carrie Collins has a question for you. Do you anticipate the listing agreement changing to reflect sellers paying the buyer's brokerage directly to make sure the commissions aren't shared between companies?
That may happen. There might be two listing agreements, or maybe they'll totally remove it. I know that there are some companies that is their business model. They can do it now within the confines of our form. They just put what they're going to pay the listing agent, and then they would just put nothing for the buyer's agent. So they can do it now without having another form. Could there be a new form? Sure, there might be.
Are you still on the forms committee now? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
That's those of you that aren't at Remax Southern Shores, you should come or professionals are essential, because Renny's on the forms committee. I'll just leave it at that. Ashley, tell me what your experience has been, because I know you've been in the saddle too, answering a bunch of questions since April. Do you kind of concur with what Renny's saying, or do you see any other areas of opportunity or confusion? And how is it now versus October?
So when Renny was talking earlier, I was going to say that these changes and the conversations around transparency, what I think has happened is that it really has had agents reevaluate running a business versus a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be more in tune with what their contract says. There aren't pieces to just gloss over and get everybody to the closing table and you have a brand new house and we're all happy and we take pictures together. They're really having to figure out, what does my conversation look like? How am I educating people so that they understand this, but strike a balance without overwhelming them? Everything Renny just explained to us is a lot for just, I think, somebody in the general public to have a grasp on, because sometimes it's a lot for agents who are in the business to have a grasp on as we, went through all those changes. But I get the opportunity to talk to agents, especially on Mondays and Tuesdays, for accountability and for discussion groups where they kind of mastermind with each other. And a lot of the conversation pieces have been around, what are the words you're choosing when you're having conversations with buyers? What words are you choosing when you're having conversations with sellers? And all of that, I give a lot of credit to coming back to Renny and also you, Tad, with the importance of the words that you choose matter. And so they're leaning on each other to have those conversations. How are you being transparent? How are you giving enough information so they understand, but not overwhelming them so that they're afraid and they just want to go to the next agent who's not going to ask them so many questions. But overall, I just think that it's making people more aware. It's making agents know their business better, and really kind of raising that professionalism.
Have we had a bunch of cases, Renny and Ashley, where we've had clients just say, I'm not gonna work with you because this is too hard. I mean, you're talking about it too much. You're playing by the rules too much. All I want to do is look at a house, or all I want to do is do a transaction. Don't try to choose words with me. Have you had a lot of people run, or are they attracted to that, do you think?
So it is interesting because I am a rule follower. It is who I am. Whether I love the rule or hate the rule, it is the rule. And when we all agree to the rule, there are no asterisks, right? We have had situations because our agents, there are some pretty huge penalties if you violate these rules. And we have a lot of lives that are at stake. I mean, not to be overly dramatic, but we have 300 people in our company. We have about 300 agents. We probably have about 25 or 30 staff people. Like that's a heavy load, right? That's a heavy burden in the fact that we have that many families that we need to protect, right? So we want to do things the right way. So our agents know that you have to have a written agreement before you show property. So our agents will get the written agreement before showing property. Well, in our market, in the beach market, they come down in packs of friends, right? So our agents are meeting with one couple, showing them property, and maybe their friends are out doing something else and they connect with someone else and they call an agent at a different company, and that agent just shows them property without having to sign a written agreement. I've heard that situation a couple of times, which is disheartening to me because I know our agent's doing the right thing, but ultimately, what does their consumer think, right? Because ultimately, we're here for our consumer, whether it's the buyer or seller. We're here to protect the public. We're here to have them accomplish a goal that they want to accomplish. And it bothers me because I don't want to say our agents look bad because they didn't, because they're doing it the right way, but it puts that doubt like, well, Ashley, you told me I had to sign a written agreement, but my friends got to go see property and they didn't have to. And there's like a no win in that situation, because if I just say, well, they didn't do it the right way, that makes our industry look bad. It's that tough position, because I've had that conversation and I'm sure you have.
Is that still happening now, or will it happen more? Will we get lazy? I mean, how's it going to go? What do you think going forward will we see? You said something.
Someone's going to have to get burned. I don't want to be on that receiving end, and I don't want anyone to get burned. Like I'm not that person. I'm not that person. I don't need to see that. I just want everyone to do what we agreed to do. Again, whether you like the rule or don't like the rule, it's irrelevant. This is the way you have to operate in business. I don't want anything to happen, but I feel like that's probably what's going to happen. Someone's going to get caught and made an example of, and it's quite scary,
Yeah, you don't want to be. I don't think you want to be on the other end of that.
I don't. And my whole thing is like, if I knew, like, I really wanted to find out who that other agent was, but the friends of the clients wouldn't give up the name, because I just really wanted to reach out to that BIC and say, I don't know if you know this, but this is what I had heard. You may want to have a conversation with your agent. Just because that's what I would want someone to do for me, to say, because that's a learning opportunity the way I look at it. I'm not here to get anyone in trouble. I don't want people to get fined. I'm not interested in all that, but maybe they honestly didn't know. I don't know how they wouldn't have known, but maybe they didn't know, or maybe they didn't realize how serious it was. So I was hoping that they wouldn't, again, that's what I would want someone to do to me. Like, if one of my agents did something, I would want them to reach out to me so I could address it and fix it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting when you look at our MLS in all of our businesses and realize that, I don't know, half of the people in the MLS don't do any business regularly and the other half do. There's still a lot of people that probably haven't done a transaction under these new rules, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, Jess, it's no fault. Jess is a new agent. she hasn't experienced it yet. So I wonder how long it's going to take to cycle through all of that to get everybody comfortable with it.
And Jess is probably actually in a better position though, because Jess is only going to know this way, and she's going to be taught this way. And I'm assuming in real estate school, that's all what you're going to teach you. And then when she goes through Ashley and Tracy's classes, like Jess is going to have an easier time than the people that have been in the business for 20 years. Because I remember this very vividly, having a conversation before it rolled out. And some agents I was talking to, like, I'm not doing that. I just am not comfortable doing that. And they're like the best of the best, right? Like they were so rattled by it. And I'm like, of you of all people, like you're so experienced, you're so knowledgeable, you know exactly what's going on. And I said, gosh, I bet you, and I know this for a fact, like we'll have a new agent and we'll tell them you do 1, 2, 3, and 4. And guess what they're going to do? 1, 2, 3, and 4. And not miss a beat, So I feel like some of that had to happen. And again, it's just that comfort.
That's interesting.
We had a new agent that reached out to me this weekend where, if you're kind of in the know, when you host an open house, that's how you can have buyers who don't necessarily have to have an agency sign and come in and ask questions, and it's still an open house. Well, they locked the door, turned around, and people pulled in the driveway, but their open house finished at 3:00. So they had them sign buyer agency to open the door back up and walk them back inside because they were outside of that open house time frame. Like they're so to the T. I think that to Renny's point, I know. I just loved that they were taking all of it seriously. So I don't think that it's waning in people just brushing it to the side. I think that hopefully, the most professional out there are going to make sure that they're, keeping that standard. So anyway, I loved hearing that story this weekend too.
Yeah, that's good. And Tracy, everyone thought the sky was falling. With Renny's guidance, we're all able to explain the changes. I think that's you helped the Chicken Little syndrome, Renny. Thank you for doing that in our lives. And then Mark, I wanted to echo what Jess said. I agree. These conversations are easy for me to have because it's the only way that I was trained. That says a lot.
And honestly, there's nothing wrong with it, right? I just feel like we always should have had these conversations with buyers. Like we always had them with sellers. So flip the script. It's really no different. And they should know what you're going to do for them. And I know how hard our agents work. And it's not a matter of throwing someone in a car and showing them 2 houses and, oh, okay, you write a contract and we'll see you in 45 days. Like that's not anywhere close to what reality is. So I felt like it is good. And I felt like that part was good for our consumer. It was good to help them understand and slow that part of the process down so we could give them the customer service that they deserve.
I think it's interesting. I want to show this from Bruce. I love Bruce. He's been in it about 20 years, I think. No offense to anyone, but these conversations should be easy for all of us. And that's because he's a rule follower too. And he's just going to do. And we had long conversations about it. But isn't it interesting that, Renny, I can't wait to listen to this back because I don't know how many times you've said the word public. The concern for the public, the right for the public. And that is one of the main commitments we make, especially when we become a realtor, is to protect them and doing this transaction that's so complicated. And yet when all these changes happened, it was all so much worry about us. Like we all turned to each other and we're like, oh my God, are we going to be able to last? Are we going to be able to do this? Are we going to be able to make the changes? But you as the leader through this, have just clearly been focused on what's best for the public and let's get that done. And I think that's exactly the center of the whole thing to me.
And honestly, you don't have to, not that you're trying to hide something, but they don't know it changed. Well, maybe they do. There was a lot of news articles, but there are some people that don't watch the news, don't read the newspaper. Honestly, to Bruce's point, it should be easy to explain. You don't have to overcomplicate this. You don't have to say, well, before August 17th, we did and now August after. No, no one cares. Tell them what you do for them, explain what your fee is, and then accomplish what they're trying to do, whether that's buy or sell property. Make it happen, right?
Yeah.
And it can happen.
Yeah, in an ethical and legal way, which
Correct.
is
And the code
exactly
of ethics,
what you're doing.
The code of ethics is about protecting the public. That's in the preamble. Like that is this is why we serve.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So if we can, I want you to look at the crystal ball for a second, or the 8-ball if you have the magic 8-ball at home that will tell you what the future holds. Tell me, what is your opinion of where we go from here? And I know there's a lot. I mean, I just can't believe the number of conversations. The DOJ is going to sue the LOJ, and the PB&J is going to get eaten by noon. I don't even know all the things that are talked about. There's a lot. What's going to happen next, in your opinion, with the changes? Are there some unintended consequences that are going to be wiped away, or some new things that are going to be added? What do you think?
So the DOJ, in my opinion, really does have a target on our back. On NAR's back, on realtors' back. So again, they don't understand what we do. Again, this is my opinion. And I feel like some of the things they put into place, having a seller they don't love that brokerages are sharing compensation. If I'm a seller and I want to give a pot of money to this person, whether you do it through the listing agreement or not, because if that's the big thing, you can take it out, right? You can the seller can pay the listing broker, and then the seller can pay the buyer's agent. If the seller wants to do that, why is that a problem, right? Like it's not a mystery. We have to disclose everything. A buyer's agent cannot receive more than what's in their buyer's agreement. So there's no hidden magic pool of money, bucket of money. So if the seller says, I want to pay you X, and the buyer says that's fine, and that's not a bad thing, because that's how transactions happen. So I don't know what will happen. I feel like people are always going to buy and sell real estate. They're always going to need someone that can guide them through this process. I don't know. I don't know if change of administration matters. I don't know. They always say if it ain't fixed, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's what they say.
Let's go that way.
That's probably the right way. I don't know. It works. And again, to the whole consumer part, I'm totally fine with. Oh, it started to charge. I'm totally fine with having consumers understand everything. That's the way it always should have been. So if it's just different disclosures, okay, then make the disclosures readable. Make it in plain English, not all this legalese, right? There's all this legalese that people, and I don't have a law degree. I've not gone to law school, but they make some certain things so complicated. And again, at the end of the day, we're supposed to serve the public. They should be able to understand what the words are.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the DOJ? I don't know that I understand. Maybe it's not even important for us to understand. What's their problem with NAR in layman's terms? Do you understand it?
Well,
and I'm looking for traffic on my podcast. So if we make the DOJ mad, maybe they'll come watch. I don't know.
No,
but I'm just kidding.
That's not a target you want to have.
I'm just joking. They listen. Yeah, Ashley just exited this. I'd like to recuse myself from this conversation. What's the problem really though? I don't understand. NAR made some changes in response to a public lawsuit, but didn't have anything to do with the DOJ didn't say you got to make these changes, right? It was
they don't love that the compensation was being shared. They felt like there was no disclosure. With the buyer's agent, how much the buyer didn't know how much the buyer agent was getting paid. And honestly, if they want full transparency, then everyone should know what everyone's making.
Right.
It's interesting the layers that they put on it, and they don't like the offer of compensation, which is challenging to me because, again, I've talked about this before. It makes me very nervous in our old world, we had a unilateral offer of compensation. It was for everyone. It wasn't for certain pockets of people. It were for certain groups of people. It wasn't for certain companies. It was a unilateral offer of compensation. So it didn't matter. Now it could be whatever the seller wants it to be. Okay.
Right.
I can understand that. However, what happens if the seller says, I had a bad transaction with that agent, so therefore I'm not going to pay, I don't want to pay him anything. And that one I'm going to pay a different percentage, and this one I'm going to pay a different percentage. And not even talking agent driven. What if it's consumer driven? What if maybe we get into some fair housing violations? That's a fear of mine because there's no unilateral. It didn't matter who the consumer was. And clearly we want everyone to be served. Everyone has the right, and it shouldn't be for specific classes or anything like that. So that's obviously been a concern of mine, and I've been very vocal about it to our agents. If your seller client wants to make different, you darn well better make sure that it's not discriminatory. They're not violating fair housing, because it can't. I mean, we all agreed, right? Like, it's in our contracts, it's in our purchase agreements, in our buy rate, like, and I just don't ever want it to be that way. It shouldn't be. It should be fair. Like, I'm a fair person. If you do for one, you do for them all. That's how I was raised. So in this situation, it's very difficult to wrap my arms around. I understand it could be based on transaction, like maybe one buyer offers a different price and therefore they can negotiate a different commission from someone else. That is totally, not the point. It's if you're going to pick and choose is the concern.
Right. And as we've seen with this lawsuit, and with all lawsuits, it's just someone making the decision about what was said and the intent of what was said. You can't always guarantee that your intent, even though it might be perfectly pure, is going to be understood that way at this level. So that's why I don't even like to play in that field,
Right.
at all. If Renny and Ashley had to change things today to as perfect system as we could have, would we leave it like it is? Would we? What modifications would you make? Because listen, I don't know how many transactions we did, 3,000 this year or something. You're on the using end of a lot of that. Like, you've gotten phone calls. You're probably as informed from a broker perspective as anyone. And this is our opinion, South Carolina. Let's chat it out. What would be better than what we're doing right now? I bet you're going to say the word public within the first 2 seconds. But what would be better?
So I guess the thing that comes to mind first for me is to somehow have a magic wand for all agents to have the same understanding of all of the pieces so that our agents can make things happen easier. Sometimes the biggest bumps in the road are everybody has a little different understanding, a little different interpretation of how things go. And so we're the ones trying to make this happen for our buyers and our sellers, the public, to your point. And we're butting heads because I understand that it should be this way and you understand that it should be this way. And we're not seeing eye to eye. So maybe that's not the answer that you want because it's not necessarily a practical piece here, but that would be what I would want, is to somehow have all of us on more of a level playing field of our understanding of all the pieces.
No, that's exactly where I wanted to head. And my follow-up question is that understanding, as you called it, is it based on interpretation of what's actually written, or is it because some people don't know what's actually written still? I mean, can you interpret what's written? Is it both? Can you interpret what's written in more than one way? I mean, are there ways?
Sure. I mean, you have attorneys that argue for or against things now, but that's why I feel like, Ashley's point is very valid. I think it should have been mandatory. Again, everyone hates that word, but there were broker in charges that didn't know about the change. So therefore their agents didn't know about the change. Not necessarily because there was like 60 webinars. And again, in my opinion, no one could say they had no idea.
Right.
But I feel like there should have been mandatory classes, in-person classes, just because you can hear the message from the same person. Maybe that would cut down some of the interpretation. I think people still will interpret it the way they're going to interpret it. But again, black and white, right? What do the words say?
Yeah, that's interesting. Because you know what that would have done if we would have all been required to go to those classes, is it would have been better for the public. I mean,
well, and the funny thing is, like, I went to every class I could go to, listened to different speakers again, because I thought maybe there was just one more. And honestly, between the time the decision was made, when the law, and to when the rollout, NAR was constantly putting out different FAQs, and then they would go back and forth between legal. And so through that entire time, like, things were evolving, like SDR was evolving, NAR was evolving, and like, you had to be plugged in. And I feel like we owe that to ourselves, our agents who are our customers, and our clients that go back to the public. I need to be the best informed I can be to help guide them. So, I laugh when people are like, oh, why should I take this? Why should I take that? I'm like, why shouldn't you? You're like, we all should. I don't, just because you've been in the business 20 years, you've not been in the business 20 years since August 17th of 2024. I'm quite certain you can learn one nugget, right?
Right. Well, that, as our coach says, that's the learning-based attitude, which is not prevalent in most people. Well, I wouldn't say most. Some people don't have a learning-based attitude. And actually, we allowed ourselves to get so lazy and comfortable. And that's probably where this whole thing came from. We just were doing it the way we were doing it. Nobody was asking questions. There were very few people that were actually reading. You could have, I bet in January of last year, if you asked that listing question that you brought up about where the money goes and who it comes from, if that was the only question you had to answer right to keep your license, we would have had a lot of people not have their license. Maybe me being included at that point. I don't know. So I think that's interesting. And I appreciate both of you. You've said so much good stuff. I appreciate you being willing to answer questions on a hard topic, because we're still learning. I'm sure there's more changes coming. One thing I'm confident of is that I want to be right where I am right now in the room with the two of you, because I know you will be on the front lines of learning about it. And Renny, can you give anybody any advice? Like, if somebody's in a different company or doesn't have access to you on a regular basis, or Ashley, where's the best place to learn about this stuff? If you wanted to, if somebody realized today, hey, I probably need to know more, where could they go and find that out?
So SCR has resource videos, like just 5-minute YouTube videos, because you don't have to have an hour-long podcast or an hour-long, video class. They have little snippet videos of all the changes. I thought those are very good, because it just drilled down on what actually changed. In addition to NAR is constantly putting out FAQs, just different pieces that you like. Talk to your seller about this, or how does this affect your buyer this way? Like, there's a ton of information out there, and reach out. Like, whether you work for our company or not, we can guide you to where you can get the information. Clearly, we're not your brokers, but we can tell you where to go get the information. And I would just challenge yourself, if you're not comfortable and you don't understand what we're talking about, challenge yourself to learn so you can be better for your consumer. And there are resources available. And I'm sure your local association has done something too. So literally all 3 levels of our association have really stepped up and really put the pieces out there. So if you want to learn, you can learn. And even just take someone a coffee and like, hey, can we talk through this? Like, it doesn't matter if you're with the same company, not with the same company. Ask them how they're doing it.
Yeah, it's better.
Learn from others, right?
Yeah, it's better to practice on each other than to practice on the public. I don't love practicing on the public. They deserve better. So we learn from each other. I think SCR and NAR has a pretty good YouTube channel. I think especially SCR does a good job with what they put out there. NAR has tons of resources, I think, that I've seen along the way. It's interesting too. Like, I appreciate about the two of you. I've heard people say there's no reason for NAR now. There's no reason for blah, 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 all of this. We won't get into that on this podcast because our perspective is, my opinion is that if you think there's a problem, then get involved and help fix it. Like, are you at the table having the conversations, or are you just at your computer having the conversations on social media? Get to where you can make a difference, right, Renny? That's why you signed up and have been so involved all along.
Honestly, and the people that say that, I don't think they really understand what the separation of the 3 levels are and what they get from each of the 3 levels. You can love or hate, like there's anything. You can love or hate. You're not going to love everything about everything, right? About every level in anything, any group you're a part of. You're not going to love everything. I don't love everything. I appreciate what all 3 provide and support us in our business. And we do need 3. We need all 3 levels looking out for us locally, statewide, and nationally. Again, you're not going to love everything that they do, but you need all 3. And if you don't understand what all 3 do for you, call me. I actually worked with our local association and our state association on pretty much like a graphic, right? Because I knew what would happen. I'm on the local association board, the state association board as well. Like, I know what's going to happen. People are going to say, what do I need to be a part of this? I don't know what they do for me. And you need to know, just as we needed to articulate our value proposition, I told all of them, you need to articulate your value proposition to all of us. Because realtors just want to help their consumers. They really don't want to, most of them don't want to get involved with the rest. So there has to be an easy mechanism to show, this is what you get from this level. This is what you get from this level. And this is what you get from this level. Because I don't honestly believe everyone knows what they get from all 3.
Right. I think it was in August. I think it was August when you told me, you just said it in passing one day, that you had a legal pad and you had 3 separate pages in your legal pad, and you were writing down everything that you could think of that was of value from each of those 3 levels of association. I don't know if you remember that or not, but I was like, wow, this sums up the whole podcast. These 2 ladies right here do this on a daily basis. They are looking forward to what might come up, and they're troubleshooting that, and they're planning according. That's why in 2021 we started talking about this NAR settlement that didn't happen until 2024. And I appreciated you doing that, Renny. And I know every time I have a question about it, I'd call you. So other people should do that too. I'll put your contact information in the show notes. But do either of you have parting words before we go off? I can't believe an hour has gone by already. But what would you like to close with? Ashley, do you have anything fantastic to say? You always have one more thing.
I do always have. I was hoping I was going to get a one more thing. So my one more thing is for you, Chad. I know. I thought so many people chimed in about all of the pieces of their business that Renny has kind of influenced, and you're in business with Renny also. So I thought I would put you in the hot seat and say, what is it that you have noticed that you do differently or better after working with Renny all these years?
Oh, I can answer that really easy, and I'm still terrible at it. I love that Renny and my wife both, but Renny, because she's not my wife, can do this better than even my wife does at work, is she holds me to a different standard of consistency and excellence in my day-to-day activities. You can't, and she doesn't do it because she's in a position of power like some people, but because of her example day to day, that's a standard that she sets that makes me want to live to that. And I've told people about both of you, that I honestly couldn't do the job that you do as good as you do it. No matter my title or our title or how we got here, Renny does this job better than anybody has ever done it. And I don't know, I shouldn't say ever will do it, because that limits the future. But I can't imagine, like David Scott told me, he said, if you hire Vince to be director of opportunity, your floor, my ceiling should be his floor. And that's totally true for Renny and me. Like she just has this standard that's up here so that's a great question. And that's the truth from my heart.
100%.
Yeah. What else? You got one more thing, Renny?
My one more thing is I'm very fortunate to be amongst a great team. Some people think it's all me. It is not all me. Anyone that knows me, I am a fly under the radar. This is not my thing. Call me on the phone. I like to duck and cover. So it's because of the team that we're allowed to do this. And Ashley is amazing, super helpful, super knowledgeable, great at what she does, has way more patience than I have. It's all good. We all work well together as a team.
Yeah, I was so impressed when I asked you to be on the show and you said, absolutely, I'd love to help. I was like, yes. I kind of waited like until the very end of the season to ask her because I had to have a backup plan. I didn't know if she would do it or not. But I think the cool thing about all our team is that if the toilet is clogged, you have a rush of people going in there to try to fix the toilet. Some in skirts, some in suits, some carrying a computer, but we're not going to say that's not my job, right? So thank you very much for your knowledge today. I got one more comment here. Always ready to help and positive equals Renny and Ashley. Oh, that's nice, Bruce. We'll log off of that. And just to let you guys know, I had some comments that we couldn't see from Kat Fandel, Joe McRoberts, Mandy Fulford, Kathy Westerbeck was on here. So a lot of people were watching. I appreciate you guys giving so freely. Let's see what the future holds. Maybe we'll do this again in 6 months to see what's changed. But Rise Up Nation, say thank you to Renny and Ashley. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Great.
Have a great day.
See you guys soon.
All right. Bye.